February 13, 1951. Colonel Paul Freeman stands in the center of a small Korean village called Chipyong-ni and makes a decision that will either save his regiment or destroy it. Chinese forces are closing in from all directions. Intelligence estimates 25,000 enemy troops converging on his position. Freeman commands about 4,500 men, the 23rd Infantry Regiment and attached units including a French battalion. He's surrounded. Outnumbered 5-1, every instinct says retreat, get out before the trap closes completely. But Freeman isn't retreating. He's digging in. He's going to stand and fight. And in the next 48 hours, he's going to prove something that the UN command desperately needs to believe, that American and UN forces can face Chinese human wave attacks, stand their ground and win. Welcome to the Battle of Chipyong-ni, the fight that changed the Korean War, the battle that military historians call the Gettysburg of Korea because it was the moment when the tide turned, when retreat and defeat stopped being inevitable, when UN forces learned they could not just survive Chinese attacks but destroy them. Let me set the stage. It's February 1951. The war is going terribly. 3 months earlier, in November 50, Chinese forces intervened with over 300,000 troops. They smashed through UN lines, surrounded and destroyed entire units. The Marines fought their way out of Chosin Reservoir, but it was a fighting retreat, not a victory. UN forces were pushed back below Seoul. The Chinese seemed unstoppable. Their human wave attacks, thousands of soldiers charging despite massive casualties, were breaking UN defensive positions everywhere. The psychology was devastating. Units that got surrounded usually got destroyed. Task Force Faith at Chosin, annihilated. Multiple battalion-sized units cut off during the Chinese offensive, destroyed or scattered. The pattern was clear. If the Chinese surrounded you, you died. So when units found themselves in danger of encirclement, they retreated, often in panic, sometimes in chaos. The Chinese were winning through intimidation as much as through combat effectiveness. General Matthew Ridgway had just taken command of 8th Army after General Walker died in a vehicle accident. Ridgway was trying to restore UN morale and stop the retreat, but it was hard. His troops had been beaten. They'd seen friends die. They'd watched units get overrun, and they believed the Chinese were invincible. Ridgway needed something to break that belief. He needed a victory. A clear, undeniable victory where UN forces stood against Chinese human waves and won decisively. Chipyong-ni would be that victory, but nobody knew it yet. Colonel Paul Freeman was a World War II veteran, fought in Europe, experienced officer, not prone to panic or rash decisions. When intelligence reports started showing Chinese forces massing around Chipyong-ni in early February, Freeman requested permission to withdraw. It was the logical move. Why stay in an exposed position when the enemy is about to surround you? General Ridgway said no. He ordered Freeman to hold Chipyong-ni. The village sat at a critical road junction. Multiple supply routes converged there. If the Chinese took it, they could use it as a base to attack UN supply lines. More importantly, Ridgway wanted to see if a well-prepared defensive position could hold against Chinese human wave attacks. He needed to know if standing and fighting was viable. Freeman's regiment would be the test. Freeman protested, not because he was afraid but because he was realistic. His intelligence officer, Lieutenant Colonel John Chiles, was reporting alarming numbers. The Chinese 4th Field Army was moving into the area, multiple divisions. Estimates suggested anywhere from 20,000 to 30,000 enemy troops. Freeman had about 4,500 men. The math was terrible. But Ridgway was insistent. Hold Chipyong-ni. Make the Chinese pay for every attack. Show that UN forces could stand their ground. If it went badly, Ridgway promised to send relief. But Freeman had to hold long enough for relief to arrive. That was the deal. Freeman accepted the mission. He told his staff they were going to prepare the best defensive position possible. If they were going to be surrounded and attacked, they'd be ready. No panic, no retreat. They'd fight and they'd win. His confidence wasn't bravado. It was based on careful planning and understanding of Chinese tactics. Chinese human wave attacks were terrifying, but they had weaknesses. The Chinese had limited artillery. Their soldiers carried minimal ammunition, maybe 100 rounds per man. They attacked at night to avoid UN air power. Their tactics relied on overwhelming numbers and shock value. But if you could hold your ground, absorb the initial assault, and maintain defensive fire, the attacks would eventually falter. The Chinese would run out of ammunition. They'd take unsustainable casualties, and they'd withdraw. Freeman explained this to his officers. The key was not breaking, not panicking when thousands of enemy soldiers came screaming out of the darkness. Hold the line. Keep firing. Trust the defensive positions. Trust each other. Do that and they'd survive, maybe even win. The men of the 23rd Infantry weren't entirely convinced. They'd heard stories about units that tried to stand and got overrun. But Freeman was confident, and confidence from a commander matters. If he believed they could win, maybe they could. Chipyong-ni sits in a valley surrounded by low hills. It's not ideal defensive terrain. You'd rather be on the hills looking down, but Freeman made it work. He positioned his forces in a circular perimeter about 3 miles in diameter. The village was in the center, infantry companies on the perimeter, artillery in the middle where it could fire in any direction. Freeman had 4 infantry battalions, 1st and 2nd Battalions of the 23rd Infantry. 3rd Battalion was detached elsewhere, and the French Battalion, officially the French Battalion of the United Nations, about 1,000 men. The French were excellent soldiers, tough, disciplined, experienced. Freeman positioned them on a critical sector of the perimeter. Each defensive position was carefully prepared: foxholes, fighting positions, fields of fire cleared, barbed wire strung, mines laid, everything done correctly. Freeman walked the perimeter personally, checking positions, talking to soldiers, making sure everyone understood the plan. No weak points, no gaps in the line. Artillery was critical. Freeman had the 37th Field Artillery Battalion, 18 105mm howitzers, plus additional artillery from division. He pre-registered fires all around the perimeter. That means the artillery crews calculated exact coordinates for every approach to the defensive position. When Chinese attacked, artillery could drop shells precisely where needed without wasting time on calculations. It was efficient and deadly. Freeman also arranged for air support. During daylight, UN aircraft could hit Chinese positions. At night, flares could illuminate the battlefield. Close air support coordination was practiced repeatedly. When the battle came, Freeman wanted every available weapon working in concert. The men dug in, improved their positions, stockpiled ammunition, filled sandbags, prepared for siege. Some were nervous, others were fatalistic, a few were confident, but everyone worked. Because they understood, when the Chinese came, their survival depended on how well they'd prepared. By February 12th, the defensive position was as ready as it could be. Intelligence reports showed Chinese forces getting closer. Patrols were making contact with enemy units probing the perimeter. The attack was coming soon. Everyone knew it. The waiting was almost worse than the fighting would be. February 13th afternoon. Chinese forces begin cutting the roads leading to Chipyong-ni. Supply convoys are ambushed. Reinforcements are blocked. By evening, Freeman's regiment is completely surrounded. Every road out is controlled by Chinese troops. The trap has closed. Freeman receives reports from his outposts. Enemy forces visible on all sides. Estimates keep climbing. 20,000, maybe 25,000. The 23rd Infantry is an island in an enemy-controlled sea. If this goes badly, there's nowhere to retreat. They're trapped. Freeman assembles his officers, tells them calmly, "We're surrounded. The Chinese will attack tonight. We're going to hold. Trust your preparations. Trust your men. We've got artillery, we've got ammunition, and we've got the defensive advantage. The Chinese have to attack uphill into prepared positions. That's the worst tactical situation for an attacker. We're going to make them pay. Some officers are skeptical. Being surrounded isn't supposed to be an advantage, but Freeman's confidence is unwavering. He's done the math, he knows his capabilities, and he genuinely believes they can win. As darkness falls, the men take their positions. Machine gunners check their weapons. Riflemen stack ammunition within easy reach. Artillery crews stand ready. Everyone's waiting. The perimeter is quiet except for the sounds of soldiers breathing, weapons clicking, the occasional whispered word. Tension is extreme. They know the Chinese are out there in the darkness. Thousands of them, getting ready to attack. Around 10 p.m., Chinese artillery opens up. Not heavy, they don't have much artillery, but enough to be dangerous. Shells drop on the perimeter. Some positions take damage. Men are wounded, but the defensive positions hold. The men stay in their foxholes, endure the bombardment, and wait for what comes next. Then, around 11 p.m., it begins. From multiple directions simultaneously, the Chinese attack. Thousands of soldiers charging out of the darkness. Bugles blowing, whistles shrieking. The noise is designed to terrify, and it works. It's terrifying, but Freeman's men don't break. They open fire. The Chinese hit the southern sector first. Waves of infantry rushing the 23rd Infantry positions. The Americans open fire with everything. Rifles, machine guns, automatic weapons. The Chinese keep coming. Men go down, others step over bodies and keep charging. It's the human wave tactic in full effect. Overwhelming numbers, except massive casualties. Break through by sheer weight. But Freeman's men hold. The defensive positions are good. The fields of fire are clear. The Chinese are attacking uphill into concentrated defensive fire. They're being slaughtered. Bodies pile up in front of American positions. Still they come, wave after wave. It seems endless. Private First Class Stanley Nelson is manning a machine gun in the southern sector. He later described it as the most intense combat he ever experienced. You fire until the barrel glows red. Then you keep firing. Chinese soldiers are so close you can see their faces in the muzzle flashes. You shoot them and more appear. It feels like the entire Chinese army is attacking your position. Your hands are shaking. Your ears are ringing from the noise. But you keep firing because if you stop, they'll overrun you. Around midnight, the Chinese break through at one point in the southern perimeter. They get into the defensive positions. Hand-to-hand fighting, grenades, bayonets, it's chaos. American soldiers fight desperately to contain the breakthrough. Reserves are rushed forward. The fighting is brutal in close range. For 30 minutes, the outcome hangs in balance. Then American reinforcements arrive and push the Chinese back out. The breach is sealed. The line holds. Artillery is decisive. Freeman's pre-registered fires mean that when Chinese troops mass for attack, shells drop on them within seconds. The artillery crews fire continuously. The guns get so hot they have to be cooled with water. Ammunition is expended at alarming rates, but it's working. Everywhere the Chinese try to mass, artillery tears them apart. The French battalion holding the western sector fights magnificently. The Chinese hit them hard around 1 a.m. The French don't give an inch. Their defensive fire is disciplined and devastating. When Chinese troops get close, the French counterattack with bayonets. It's old-school warfare, steel on steel. The French drive the Chinese back, killing hundreds in close combat. The French commander, Lieutenant Colonel Ralph Moncler, personally leads counterattacks. He's 59 years old. Retired general who volunteered to command the battalion as a lieutenant colonel. Tough as nails. His men love him, and they follow him into close combat without hesitation. By 3 a.m., the Chinese attacks begin to weaken. They've been attacking for 4 hours. They've taken enormous casualties. Their ammunition is running low. The human wave tactics that worked elsewhere aren't working at Chipyong-ni. The defensive positions are too strong. The fire too heavy. They pull back to regroup. February 14th, dawn. The sun comes up over Chipyong-ni, revealing a battlefield covered with Chinese dead. In some sectors, bodies are piled 3 and 4 deep. The 23rd Infantry men look out at what they inflicted and are both horrified and grimly satisfied. They held. They survived the night. But they're still surrounded. Chinese forces control all the roads. During daylight, the Chinese stay hidden. They fear UN air power, but they're still there, watching, waiting for nightfall to attack again. Freeman's first priority is resupply. The regiment expended enormous amounts of ammunition during the night. Artillery fired thousands of rounds. Rifle ammunition, machine gun ammunition, grenades, all need replenishing, and they have wounded who need evacuation. The solution is airdrops. C-119 and C-47 transport aircraft fly over Chipyong-ni and drop supplies by parachute. It's not perfect. Some supplies drift outside the perimeter into Chinese-controlled areas, but enough lands inside. Ammunition, medical supplies, food. The regiment is resupplied from the air. Wounded are a problem. Normally, wounded would be evacuated by vehicle or helicopter, but vehicles can't get through, roads are blocked, and the small helicopters available in 51 can only carry 1 or 2 wounded at a time. Most of the wounded have to stay. The regimental aid station is overwhelmed. Doctors and medics work continuously, treating injuries, performing emergency surgery in field conditions. The less seriously wounded are patched up and sent back to their positions. Every man is needed. During the day, UN aircraft attack Chinese positions around the perimeter. Fighter bombers drop napalm and bombs, strafe with machine guns and rockets. The Chinese casualties from air attack are significant, but there are so many Chinese troops that even heavy airstrikes don't eliminate the threat. They're dug in, dispersed, and will attack again tonight. Freeman meets with his battalion commanders, assesses the situation. The perimeter held last night but barely in places. Tonight will be worse. The Chinese will adjust their tactics. They'll probe for weak points. They'll concentrate overwhelming force at breakthrough points. Freeman reinforces the sectors that took the heaviest pressure, redistributes ammunition, adjusts artillery fire plans, prepares for round 2. As darkness falls on February 14th, Freeman's men take their positions again. This time they know what's coming. The terror of the unknown is gone, replaced by grim determination. They held last night. They'll hold tonight. The Chinese artillery barrage starts around 9 p.m. heavier than last night. They've brought up more guns. Shells pound the perimeter. Some positions take direct hits. Men are killed or wounded before the infantry assault even begins, but most of the defensive positions survive, built strong enough to withstand indirect fire. 10 p.m. the Chinese infantry comes again. This time, they're hitting multiple sectors simultaneously with even more force. The southern sector, the western sector where the French are, the northern sector. They're trying to force Freeman to commit his reserves everywhere at once, to find a weak point and exploit it. The fighting is even more intense than the first night. Chinese troops get closer to some positions before being driven back. In several places, they're fighting inside the American perimeter. Grenades flying both directions. Soldiers fighting hand-to-hand in the darkness. It's chaos and violence on a scale that's hard to comprehend unless you were there. The French battalion is hit by an estimated 5,000 Chinese troops around 11 p.m. 5,000 against 1,000 French soldiers. The Chinese are trying to break the French line, roll it up, and split the perimeter in 2. The French refuse to break. They're fighting from foxholes, from trenches, some fighting hand-to-hand. Lieutenant Colonel Moncler is everywhere, rallying his men, leading counterattacks. At one point, Chinese troops break through the French line. Moncler personally leads a counterattack with fixed bayonets and drives them back out. The man is 59 years old, fighting like he's 25. His men follow him because he's leading from the front. The southern sector, held by 1st Battalion 23rd Infantry, is under continuous assault from midnight to 3 a.m. 3 hours of near-constant Chinese attacks, wave after wave. The Americans are exhausted. Some machine gun barrels are so hot they're glowing even in the darkness. Men are running low on ammunition in some positions. They're calling for resupply, but it's dangerous to move ammunition forward while under fire. Still, supply parties brave the fire to get ammunition to the positions that need it most. Acts of courage happening everywhere. Artillery continues to be the decisive factor. Every time the Chinese mass for a major assault, artillery drops on them. The destruction is devastating. Chinese soldiers are caught in the open by air-bursting shells, shells that explode above ground, sending shrapnel in all directions. It's lethal. Entire assault formations are torn apart before they reach American lines. But the Chinese keep coming. Their determination is remarkable even as it leads to their destruction. They're following orders. They're committed to the attack, and they believe if they just keep attacking, eventually the Americans will break. But Freeman's men aren't breaking. They're tired. They're scared, but they're holding. By 4 a.m., the Chinese attacks weaken again. 2 nights of continuous assault. Casualties are staggering. Ammunition is depleted, and still the perimeter holds. The Chinese pull back again. This time they've had enough. They start withdrawing from the area. The attacks won't resume the next night. Freeman's regiment has survived. Against 5-to-1 odds, surrounded, attacked repeatedly by massive enemy forces. And they didn't just survive, they won. Chinese casualties are estimated at over 5,000 killed or wounded. Freeman's regiment suffered approximately 500 casualties total over the 2 nights. A 5-to-1 exchange ratio, decisive victory. February 15th morning. Freeman receives word that a relief column is fighting its way to Chipyong-ni. The 1st Cavalry Division and 5th Cavalry Regiment have been ordered to break through Chinese lines and reach the surrounded regiment. It's dangerous. The relief force is fighting through enemy positions, but they're making progress. That afternoon, tanks from the 5th Cavalry break through to Chipyong-ni's perimeter. The siege is lifted. The 23rd Infantry is no longer surrounded. Freeman's men cheer as they see the tanks approaching. Relief. Reinforcement, proof that they weren't abandoned. The relief column brings fresh troops, more supplies, and evacuates the accumulated wounded. The battlefield is surveyed. Chinese bodies are everywhere, thousands of them. In some places, they're so thick you can't walk without stepping on remains. It's grim evidence of just how many Chinese died trying to take Chipyong-ni. The victory's significance is immediately recognized. General Ridgway visits Chipyong-ni on February 16th. He congratulates Freeman and his men personally, tells them they've done something historic. They proved UN forces can stand against Chinese human wave attacks and win decisively. This changes everything. And it did change everything. After Chipyong-ni, UN morale improved dramatically. The myth of Chinese invincibility was shattered. Units stopped automatically retreating when threatened with encirclement. They started believing they could stand and fight. The psychology of the war shifted. Chipyong-ni was the turning point. The Chinese, for their part, learned harsh lessons. Their human wave tactics, which had worked so well in November and December 50, were no longer effective against well-prepared defensive positions with adequate artillery support. They'd suffered unsustainable casualties at Chipyong-ni. They'd need different tactics if they were going to continue fighting. Military historians call Chipyong-ni the Gettysburg of the Korean War because it was the high-water mark of Chinese offensive power. Just as Confederate forces never fully recovered from Gettysburg, Chinese forces never regained the momentum they had before Chipyong-ni. The war would continue for 2 more years. But the Chinese were never again as close to victory as they were before Freeman's regiment stopped them. Freeman was promoted and received multiple decorations. His regiment was awarded a Presidential Unit Citation. Individual soldiers received silver stars, bronze stars, and other honors, but the real reward was survival and victory. The lessons of Chipyong-ni were studied extensively. How to prepare defensive positions, how to coordinate artillery fires, how to maintain discipline under extreme pressure, how to defeat human wave tactics. All of these lessons were incorporated into UN tactical doctrine and made subsequent defensive battles more successful. The French battalion's performance was particularly noted. They'd fought with extraordinary courage and skill. Lieutenant Colonel Moncler became a hero in France. The French battalion remained in Korea and continued fighting with distinction, but Chipyong-ni was their defining moment. For the individual soldiers who fought there, Chipyong-ni was both a nightmare and a source of pride. Nightmare because of the intensity of combat, the casualties, the close calls. Pride because they'd done something remarkable. They'd stood surrounded and outnumbered and won. That's not something every soldier can say. Private Nelson, the machine gunner I mentioned earlier, survived the battle. He later said Chipyong-ni changed him. Before, he'd been scared of the Chinese, thought they were unbeatable. After Chipyong-ni, he knew they could be beaten. It was a psychological shift that mattered as much as the tactical victory. The Battle of Chipyong-ni stands as proof that defensive preparation, disciplined fire, artillery support, and leadership can overcome numerical superiority. 5-to-1 odds sounds insurmountable, but Freeman proved it wasn't. With the right tactics and the right mindset, even a surrounded and outnumbered force can win. That's the legacy of Chipyong-ni, not just a defensive victory but proof of what's possible when soldiers refuse to break, when they trust their training, trust their leaders, and trust each other. Freeman's regiment didn't just survive, they won, decisively, and in doing so they changed the course of the Korean War. February 13th through 15th, 1951, 48 hours that proved human waves could be stopped. That being surrounded wasn't a death sentence, that UN forces could stand and win. Chipyong-ni, the battle that changed everything.